Honors Algebra 2 Pre-Calc. We are doing 2.2, which is properties of exponents. So I'm going to actually pop over here first and talk about notation and vocab. So if we have a to the nth power, right, a to the n, the a is referred to as the base, and the n is the exponent. So let's talk about properties of some integer exponents. So let a be an element of reals, right? We've talked about that already. That's the same way of saying it. A is a real number. If n is a natural number, meaning a counting number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc., then a to the n means a times a times a times a times a n times. So, for example, a cubed would mean a times a times a, right? And you know, etc., right? So, like b squared would be b times b, all right? If a is non-zero, right, a not equal to 0, then a raised to the 0 is 1. So a to the 0 is 1. Down here I made a separate note that says that 0 to the 0, which you can't have, that's why they gave you this restriction that a is non-zero. 0 to the 0 is called an indeterminate form, which right now we're not going to discuss, but is something we'll learn a lot more about in depth in calc. Last property of integer exponents. If n is a natural number, then a to the negative n means 1 over a to the n. Now, to be clear, we can actually, so this is what your book has listed, but you don't actually need this. You don't need if a is a natural number. If n is a natural number. So a to the negative n is 1 over a to the n all the time, even if it's not a natural number. So just throwing that out there. Okay, so a negative exponent, the way I always memorize it is, it's like this guy saying, hey, I'm on the wrong floor. So a to the negative n shouldn't be on the top. He should flip down to the bottom, and he becomes an a to the n. So let's walk through example 1 and P1. We're going to evaluate a couple of exponential expressions without a calculator. So 2 to the 4th, right? I would recommend that you memorize some basic powers, and I'm going to go through that probably in our next video or maybe at the end of this one. So 2 to the 4th, 2 to the 1st is 2. Times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So 2 to the 4th is a 16. 3 squared, I think hopefully we all have our squares memorized. That's 3 times 3, which is 9, right? So if you need to write this out as 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 and do the math, that's fine. If you need to write this out as 3 times 3, that's fine. I'm okay with you being able to do this math in your head. Nobody thinks that's cheating. Now 2 to the negative 3rd, remember, that means, hey, I'm on the wrong floor. So this is a 1 over a 2 cubed. Right? And you can either write that as a 1 over 2 times 2 times 2, if that helps you, or you can just do that in your head. 2 cubed is an 8, right? 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So this is a 1/8, right? And 5 to the negative 2nd is a 1 over 5 to the 2nd, which would be a 1 over 25. Again, nobody thinks it's cheating if you can do that in your head. If you want to pause me, you can. I'm going to go ahead and walk through P1. So 4 squared is also a 16, right? 4 times 4 is a 16. It's just a coincidence that the first part of each one of these was a 16. 10 to the 3rd is a 1 with 3 zeros, right? It's 1,000. 3 to the negative 3rd would be 1 over 3 to the 3rd, right? Which is going to be a 1 over 27. And then 6 to the negative 2nd is going to be a 1 on top of a 6 to the 2nd, which is a 1/36. So before we stop this video, and then we'll go on to some other slightly harder stuff, and we'll talk about some properties of exponents, let's talk about some of the powers that are going to be beneficial for you to bother to memorize. I would suggest that you know powers of 2 up to at least 2 to the 5th just for convenience. So, again, when I say something's worth memorizing, like your brain is different than my brain, and what you choose to memorize is going to be different than what my brain chooses to memorize, and it's going to be different than what the person next to you memorizes. So you're going to have to decide for you what stuff is worth memorizing and what stuff's not. So this is just my suggestions, right? So my opinions, take them, leave them, do what you will with them. I would suggest that first thing you talk about knowing is powers of 2 up to 2 to the 5th at least. So we're going to just assume we all understand that any non-zero number to the 0 is 1. So I'm not going to start with that. I'll start with 2 to the 1st is 2, 2 to the 2nd is 4, 2 to the 3rd is 8, 2 to the 4th is 16, and 2 to the 5th is 32. If any of you have played the game 2048, you're probably pretty good at powers of 2. The reason I say up to 2 to the 5th is that's what comes up commonly, and if you needed to find higher powers, you could just keep multiplying by 2, right? So you could get that 2 to the 6th is 64, and so on. Okay, the second thing I'm going to suggest is that you have powers of 3 up to 3 to at least 3 to the 4th. So 3 to the 1st is 3, 3 to the 2nd is 9, 3 to the 3rd is 27, and 3 to the 4th is 81. Okay. Again, I would suggest memorizing these. You don't have to do that. It's your business. Okay, third thing that's worth knowing is you should probably know the squares of 1 to, honestly, at least 1 to 15, maybe 20. Right? You can probably get by without 16 to 20, but definitely 1 to 15, right? So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 2, is not 2, is 4. Come on, brain. Okay, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64, 9 squared is 81, and 10 squared is 100. 11 squared is a 121, 12 squared is a 144, 13 squared is a 169, 14 squared is a 196, which is helpful if you remember 13 because then you're just transposing the last two numbers, and then 15 squared is a 225, right? If you choose to memorize these, that's up to you. Like the next 5, I will say that like they're not awful and it's kind of useful to have. So 16 squared, 17 squared, 18 squared, 19 squared, 20 squared. So I'll say that these are the ones I'm the most rusty on because they don't come up that much, right? 20 squared should be pretty easy. That's 400, right? So 16 squared is a 256. 17 squared definitely ends in a 9. I don't know, my brain blanked. 18 squared is a 324. 19 squared is a 361. 289, sorry. Got it. My brain just kind of flaked. Anyway, again, these are definitely less common, but knowing up to 15 is pretty useful. All right, so other things worth knowing. So I'm just going to squeeze down in here. You should know powers of 10 because they're obvious, right? So we'll call this number 4. You should know powers of 10. So like literally all powers of 10. Because it's a 1 and whatever the exponent number of zeros, right? So for example, 10 to the 8th is literally a 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zeros, right? So there's no reason not to know. There's no reason not to know powers of 10. Okay, so those are the big ones to know, right? And then number 5, right? Cubes up to 10. Right? So 1 cubed is 1, 2 cubed is 8, 3 cubed is 27, 4 cubed is 64, 5 cubed is 125, 6 cubed is a 216, 7 cubed is a 343, 8 cubed is a 512, 9 cubed is probably a 729, and 10 cubed is a 1,000. I don't know, my brain said 729. Okay, so, yep, that's right. Anyway, so, you can come up with whatever ways you want to memorize these that you want, but it's not even really memorizing for powers of 10. But for the others, it's really useful to know because you'd be surprised the number of times that you're going to have to cube them. I think most of you probably know these just fine, right? So know if you put the time in to know 6 cubed, 7 cubed, 8 cubed, 9 cubed, and 10 cubed is kind of useful. The way I memorize it, I've never had trouble with 6 cubed, but for 343, I always think, oh, hey, 3 and 4 are 7, and then there's the cube, right? Through 3, 4, that's 7 cubed. For the 512, I think about the fact that the numbers add up to 8. For the 9 cubed, I think about the 7 and the 2 being a 9, and then there's another 9. And then again, 10 cubed shouldn't be an issue because it's just a 10 to a power, so it's a 1 with 3 zeros. Anyway, so that's it for this video. I'm just going to suggest that you maybe make a point of memorizing these. That's not to say that you're not going to see like a 3 to the 5th someday. You might, but here's my argument. If you know 3 to the 5th, or 4th, it's pretty easy to multiply by 3 and get that 3 to the 5th is a 243. So again, the more you know and the more knowledge you possess, the easier it's going to be sometimes. But you have a limited amount of brain space. So do I, so does everybody. So you're going to have to choose for yourself what stuff you want to cram in your brain, knowing that you only get so much space to cram in knowledge. Yeah, so that's it for this video.